Would like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas Eve, and also say a big thank you to everyone who has joined us over at Patreon. I have some news. The wait is about over. I know a lot of you have said, Florida Maki, we love supporting you on Patreon, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of recent content over there, and some of the content doesn't seem like it's all that controversial. Well, the wait is over. I have a video that I have almost completed, and I will warn you, it's going to be R-rated, and it's not going to be for the faint of heart. We're going to cover all of the main topics that we've been covering the last 6 months to a year, but with the gloves off. The 2020 sniffles, the issues in Florida, crypto, you name it. But it's going to be not for anyone other than adults. So perhaps send the kids out to play in the snow if you're someplace where they have snow. It's not something they can do here in Florida. We just send them to the beach. Now, also, speaking of spirited conversations, last night, those of you who joined us on Twitch got to participate in a very heated conversation about an event that happened in Lubbock, Texas, and you also got to watch me get destroyed by a dragon over and over and over again all night long. I didn't end up beating the dragon or this particular scenario, so we'll be back at it tonight, Lord willing, around 10 to 10:30 p.m. Twitch.tv/Florida Maki. I'm telling you guys, Patreon, Twitch, these are going to be the platforms of the future. These are going to be the places that people go when they want to have actual, real, free speech conversations. It's just the reality. So would love to see you at either one. Twitch is a little bit later in the evening. I do that for our West Coast folks because for them, they're like 2 to 3 hours behind. So it gives them an opportunity to have a discussion with me. For the East Coast folks, it's 10 or 11 till 1 o'clock in the morning. It's not real bad, but if you've got a job, it could probably cramp your style a little bit. So anyway, just wanted to give everybody those options. But in today's video, there are 3 stories out. 3 from science today. Accepted science, and we all know accepted science is the only thing we're allowed to believe, that prove categorically there is life in Antarctica far beyond what anyone has so far revealed. There's a story about woolly mammoths. There's a story about an eagle in Massachusetts. And there's a story out of India about a fish that lives in a cave. And each of these stories points directly to the fact that there's something going on down there they don't want you to know about. So I'll also warn you, this is going to be a longer video based on everything we have to cover. So get comfortable. We're going to be here for a minute. Let's start with the fish. In this very remote, obscure cave called Meghalaya Cave, researchers have stumbled upon a fish. A fish that surprised them in a way that they had no explanation for. Now, these caves have no access to the outside world. These pools where these little fish live have no sunlight. You can't get to a lake or a stream from them. They are completely self-contained. Now, smaller fish, little tiny minnows, have been found in many caves around the world. But what they found in this cave shocked them. In a cave in a remote forested area of Meghalaya's Giantia Hills, Harry's part of an annual expedition called Caving in the Abode of Clouds, and this is in India, remembers being surprised by how large the fish was after he pulled it out of the pool. It was just over 40 centimeters. The hand net I had was around 10 to 15 centimeters, which made me feel rather foolish. But it would be unfair to fault this particular researcher named Harry's for carrying a net of that small size. The 250 known subterranean, occurring under the Earth's surface, fish species around the world measure only around 8 to 8.5 centimeters on average. Now here's the fish. Lives in a cave, no access to the outside world, no sunlight. There are a lot of animals that live in caves around the world. That's not surprising, but many of them have the ability to come and go from the caves. This fish clearly does not. How could a fish of this size live in a cave with no access to sunlight? What would it be eating? Well, they asked the researcher. Guess what he said? No clue. He said they had no clue what it would be eating. See, there would have to be not just one. It says right here, so what does this fish feed on? No clue at all, says Raghavan, but there might be lots of aquatic invertebrates in the water and even smaller fish. You would need an entire ecosystem of things to support a fish that big. What does it eat? What does that thing eat? And then what does that thing eat? Now, what does this have to do with Antarctica? Well, that's one of the biggest pushbacks I get. Florida Maquis, nothing could live under the ice. There's no sunlight. Nothing could grow under there. Well, apparently now we know that's not the case. You can have large, complex life forms living where there would be water and just the nutrients around them. And we know for a fact in Antarctica, the world's largest supply of fresh water, copious amounts of volcanic soil, and massive amounts of life. Now, if you had the ability to catch fish like this, you could live. It wouldn't be a great lifestyle, but if this could live in a cave in India, what could possibly be living in Antarctica? Also, here's another article, Life Without Life. I'll give you these links. Life Without Light, creatures of Megalaya's caves. In a fragile subterranean world of absolute darkness, fascinating life forms emerge. Now, what does this have to do with anything? This is a very rare shark. It's called a Port Jackson shark. I don't believe it poses any real threat to human beings. There's lots of sharks around the world. I used to have an aquarium years ago, and they had little tiny ones you could put in your aquarium. But in Antarctica, I found something very strange. And it was long ago, and people laughed at me for this, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later too. But right near the water, I found a very faint image of what looked like, in one layer, a shark of some unknown type feasting on the tentacle of a squid. Now, when you zoom in on this image, it's grainy, but it's there. Here you have the nose of the shark. You can even see the eye, the teeth, the lower jaw. You can even see one of the pectoral fins right here. And then you see what looks very clearly like a tentacle of a giant squid. Now, this is in an area right by the water. This could have been some canal, and they caught this thing just by chance on satellite. And one of the pushbacks I got was, that kind of looks like a shark, but how do you explain those two big nostrils on the front, Maki? I've never seen a shark like that. Well, I found one. There could be all sorts of different adaptations in Antarctica for different life forms. This catfish that they found, and for lack of a better term, in this cave, has no eyes. It lost the need for them, but yet it's thrived. So that is piece of evidence number one. Piece of evidence number two. In Massachusetts, a guy was walking through a park, and he looked up, and he saw some bald eagles, but then he saw something much larger than a bald eagle. This is a Steller sea eagle. It's one of the largest birds in the world. In fact, I believe it's the heaviest. It has a wingspan of 8 feet. This is it next to a crow. It is a giant animal. Now, what makes this so crazy? The Steller sea eagle is only found in Asia. It flew literally over the poles, 5,000 miles from its home to land in Massachusetts. Spectacularly rare, enormous eagle shows up in North America 5,000 miles from home. Birdwatchers in Massachusetts have been given an early Christmas present in the form of an incredibly rare sighting, a Steller sea eagle, which is native to Asia, almost 8,000 kilometers away from the Kamchatka Peninsula. Now, what this means is that large flying beasts have the ability to range over much larger areas than people had initially thought. There have been stories going back as long as they've been writing stories down about dragons in Asia, in South America, in Europe, and they've largely been dismissed as flights of fancy, pardon the pun. Well, what if dragons were able to range all the way from Antarctica up through South America, Africa, into Europe? This is how big this eagle is next to a human being. I'm not saying this thing could get a small child, but I wouldn't want to test it. And this is what we know. Now, this is also a picture from China. And there are different types of dragon. There's dragons, there's wyverns, there's drakes. Some have four limbs, some have two. Some, the forelimbs are part of the wing. The point is this: almost every single story I've ever heard about a dragon says what? They live in the mountains. There are some stories of dragons in swamps, but largely they're talking about subterranean type of dragons. But flying dragons, they always come from the mountains. Now, that sea eagle was found up here in Massachusetts. It could have just been following the mountains. Kamchatka is way over here. It could have literally flown over the sea and just harbored in the mountains the entire way. It had been spotted over Canada multiple times before this final arrival in Massachusetts. Why couldn't dragons, which were reportedly far larger, have done the same thing? From Antarctica, followed the mountains all the way up through Chile, Argentina. The stories, they worshipped dragons in South America. Cave paintings, China, everywhere around the world, this has been reported. Now, some would say, well, Florida maquis, wait a minute, why don't we still see them? Well, perhaps they were hunted. And there would have been a good, very boring, confirmed science explanation for this. And it comes right out of Game of Thrones. This, I'm sure a lot of you who watch the series, Daenerys Targaryen, she's got her 3 dragons. What's the big problem with them, though? Why did they have to be locked in a dungeon, those of you who are familiar with the story? Well, they have to eat, just like any other animal. And they'll eat anything, just like any other predator. In one of the episodes, they talk about just in one day, one of the dragons ate 18 sheep and 11 goats. So clearly they would have been hunted for a reason. And that's why you wouldn't see them in Europe, and that would have given rise to all of the stories of, the knights in shining armor going out to get rid of the dragons. You see, these people, their flocks were their bank accounts. So something like this had to be dealt with. Sheep and goats and cattle and livestock, this was their bread and butter. So they found ways to get rid of them, much like they did in the series. So very boring answer now. Antarctica. Florida maquis, have you ever found dragons in Antarctica? Well, I'm sure a lot of you can answer that question. I've found 5 or 6 different images that when you look at it in the right layer, at the right angle, you will find it. Give me 1 second here to get this to... This is one of the tricks of Google Earth Pro. And you can't do this with Google Earth, the web-based, by the way. You have to use Google Earth Pro. When you look very closely here where this giant area of ice melt is, you will see what's very clearly the head of perhaps the deceased dragon being revealed from the melting ice. You can see the eye, ear, nose. You can even see a nostril, lower jaw. And some would say, well, you know, that could be pareidolia. Maybe you're looking for dragons. Well, I found 5. That would be some serious pareidolia if you could find 5. Just in the high-res regions where you can zoom in and look at this stuff. Now, I will admit some of these may be carvings from long ago civilizations that worshipped dragons and birds of all kinds. As you can see here, this one's a little bit more difficult, depending on the angle. And that's really the key here. Once again, lower jaw here, upper jaw, eye, some type of a headdress. And this is jutting out from a piece of rock right here. So to my mind, this is more than likely a creation of some kind. The next one, though, the third dragon, this one was the smoking gun for me. It absolutely was. And it's in this very strange region where you have to be very careful about the angle. Now, I could do probably an hour-long video just on all of the different things going on in the Mertz-Ninnis Valley. We've talked about this when we were doing Antarctica videos a long time ago, the Mertz-Ninnis Valley, for a long time, and how much was going on there. You can see all sorts of things, but this giant frozen sculpture of a dragon's head is beyond pareidolia. You can see the eyebrow ridge here, the eye, the long snout, the nostrils, the mouth. Everything is very, very clear here. And when you zoom out, you can see something up here that looks like it has wings. You can see what looks like some type of a picture of a bird taking off, or a sculpture of a bird taking off here. And as if that wasn't enough, where's the... Oh. Once again, and this is amongst many others, another head of a bird. You've got the orange beak right here. Something they're working on. What's going on in the Mertz-Ninnis Valley, I have no idea, but it is not penguins and seals, wind, ice, rock, and snow, that's for sure. Now this next one looks like the fossilized remains of a dragon or a dragon-like creature. Once again, upper jaw, lower jaw, you even have an eye socket up here. It looks like this one is perished, and you can see the body, or where the body would have been, down here below. And it's just lying on the ice. Looks like the wings have been folded by the pressure of the ice. And let's see. You see, pareidolia is seeing a cloud and having it look like temporarily something that's real. 5 different ways, in 5 different distinct locations, where you see things with jaws and eye lines, and once again, upper jaw, lower jaw, eye, eyebrow ridge. Very clear, very distinct imagery. And on this this particular number 2 topic, there's another one. And let's see if I can find the right ear. Yep, this is when this area was frozen. And it looks like they may have caught the shadow of one in flight. You got the long neck, the head, and what look like 2 wings right here, and you can almost see the talons below. Perhaps more of a drake or a wyvern. So to me, this is very clear, very substantial proof that Antarctica in the next 100 to 150 years is going to change the world. Now we have one more. Pardon me there for 1 minute. The woolly mammoth. They have once again retracted their beliefs about the woolly mammoth. Environmental reconstruction reveals the mammoths persisted long after they disappeared from the fossil record. They had these old dirt samples that they went back and retested, and they found that the woolly mammoths lived alongside man for, not hundreds, thousands of years longer than they previously thought. In Canada, 5,000 years longer than experts previously estimated. See, before that it was 10,000 years ago. Now they've cut it to 5,000. I wonder what another 2 or 3 years or 5 years of research is going to reveal. How many times they're going to have to retract what they believe is accepted science and then put out an article like this that they hope nobody will read, or at least read between the lines. Now, some might say, Florida Maquis, great, fantastic. Does this have anything to do with Antarctica? Well, it sure does. Those of you who've watched my videos know we found one. We found what looks very clearly like a woolly mammoth, and one of the big pushbacks I got is, well, what could a woolly mammoth be eating, Florida Maquis? Well, what do we know, going back to the issue with the catfish? That beneath surfaces, like in caves, or in this case, beneath the ice, there could be all sorts of ecosystems that would provide the food necessary to support something like this. Now, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, here's the tusk, here's the front left, here's the front right, here's the head, the ear, the body right here. What looks like very clearly a woolly mammoth. And this is another region of Antarctica where there is so much going on, where you can clearly see caves and openings and platforms where those living below the ice have access to the surface. Do they live on the surface full time? No. Do they live beneath the ice full time? No. So it's really not a one or the other thing. I mean, look at this platform right here. Look at how perfect this has been designed. You are never going to convince me that this is a naturally occurring thing that just happens when wind blows over a rock and it's cold and it's snowy. This right here is some type of a construction. What its purpose is, we don't know. Why? Because we don't investigate. I mean, you can just go through this imagery and find hundreds of things. Hundreds and hundreds of things. It's easier with a little bit of a bigger screen computer. If you have a touch screen, that really, really helps. But those are the big three. They have had to retract what they believe about the woolly mammoth and how long it survived based on DNA. There's an eagle that has now ranged literally from one side of the globe to the other, proving that if a bird can do it, a dragon for sure could, and we have all sorts of visual imagery that proves this, exists in Antarctica. And we also have this little catfish that lives completely away from the sun, completely away from the sea, in these hidden deep caves. And it's not a little 2 or 3 inch catfish. It's a substantial fish, a fish that if you had a population of them could support human life. And these are the facts. So anyway, real quick, just wanted to cover something here right at the end. To be a YouTuber and to especially talk about Antarctica, you need to be willing to be laughed at and have kind of a thick skin. Some of you might remember a year, maybe 2 ago, I talked about a survival vehicle. And boy, I tell you what, I caught a ton of crap about this. I talked about this GMC Acadia Denali and all of the different features on it that would be very useful in a survival situation. Now, I got a lot of pushbacks. At Florida Maki, you need a big truck. You need this big, huge honking truck that's got this big jacked up this, that, and the other and all this and can pull all this weight. Well, I'll tell you what, this was the best decision as far as a vehicle goes I've ever made in my life. Used car prices are up across the board, but for this particular vehicle, it's now, 3 years after having purchased it, worth almost as much as I paid for it. It literally has had almost no depreciation, and what they're going for on the lots is almost what this vehicle went for when it was new in 16. It has a whole bunch of features on it. It's got the 115 volt outlet, seating for 7, many other things. The battery to access the power systems is behind the passenger front seats and the rear seat floorboard, which is really kind of strange. It's all-wheel drive. It's super common engine, so no shortage on parts. It's got the roof rack, and this vehicle, believe it or not, can actually tow as much as a Chevy Colorado, or a GMC Canyon. This one is rated to tow 5,500 pounds, so I could pull a camper without any real problem, a decent-sized one. So it has a great many features on it. It's got a heads-up display. But once again, a lot of guys said, well, that doesn't look like a real man's vehicle. It looks like a minivan on steroids. I can't believe you're driving around in that. And got, of course, called beta and all this. Best decision I ever made, as far as a car goes, by far. So, anyway, also, still waiting for that La Palma volcano tsunami that everybody assured us in August would be here by now. Still waiting. It's a little cooler today. Sunny, though. Had a cold front move in. But anyway, have a wonderful Christmas Eve. And once again, those of you who have joined us on Patreon, your wait is almost over. Thank you very much for your patience. I appreciate it more than you know. And once again, the warning, the videos that are going to show up on Patreon now are likely going to go through Vimeo. And Vimeo doesn't have the same restrictions. So be warned, don't have any kids around. Or if you're a pearl-clutching type of person, perhaps pass. Because it's going to be gloves off. It's going to be real talk. As if we were sitting around having a beer. So, God bless. I'll just leave that there. Like, share, subscribe. And Lord willing, we will see you guys tonight on Twitch. Have a wonderful night.